Blog Talk Radio.
Franchise interviews. From Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia, you're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews. Welcome to Franchise Interviews, an up-close, behind-the-scenes look at franchising and entrepreneurship. Listen to interviews with franchisers, franchisees, franchise authors, franchise experts, and attorneys. And now, welcome your host, Marty McDermott, and Franchise Interviews.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of Franchise Interviews, where for over 15 years now, we've been asking the Frantrepreneurs one-on-one. I'm your host, Marty McDermott. I'm the president of Franchise Interviews, and we have a great show today. Well, we're meeting with Nick Lopez, the founder of Line Painting. And after discovering his passion for home improvement while owning his first painting LLC, Nick founded Line Painting in 2013 to set the standard of excellence in painting high-end residential and commercial properties. We're going to talk to Nick about that in just a moment on Franchise Interviews. So stick around because we have a great show.
Franchise Teacher.
Would you like to know how to franchise your concept or grow your franchise business?
Meet the experts at Franchise Teacher.
The goal of Franchise Teacher is to teach, coach, consult, and advise. The team of experts at Franchise Teacher will evaluate your business model and present you with a winning business strategy.
Franchise Teacher will help you decide whether or not your concept works and if it's franchisable. Franchise Teacher is proud to have over 30 years of experience in franchising as both franchisees and franchisors.
Franchise Teacher are developers of over a dozen franchise systems, which include brick and mortar as well as home-based concepts of nearly 3,000 combined franchise locations.
Whether you need to add more units or get more customers, Franchise Teacher can help. We will teach.
Franchise Teacher will help you learn our proven system.
Coach.
Franchise Teacher will help you provide a game plan to succeed.
Consult.
Franchise Teacher will make sure you stay on track.
And advise.
Franchise Teacher will help you learn from our over 30 years of experience in franchising as both franchisees and franchisors. Take advantage of our free, no-obligation phone consultation. Simply go to franchiseteacher.com or call us at 561-385-3032.
That's franchiseteacher.com or call us at 561-385-3032.
Hi, this is Connie McDermott, Administrative Assistant for Franchise Interviews, LLC, and you're listening to Franchise Interviews.
Franchise Interviews. From Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia, you're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to a very special edition of Franchise Interviews, where for over 15 years now, we've been asking the Frantrepreneurs one-on-one. I'm your host, Marty McDermott. I'm the president of Franchise Interviews, and as we were saying earlier, we have a great show today. Well, we're meeting with Nick Lopez, the founder of Line Painting. And after discovering his passion for home improvement while owning his first painting LLC, Nick founded Line Painting in 2013 and set the standard of excellence in painting high-end residential and commercial properties. Hi, Nick. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
This is my pleasure, Nick. Thanks. I'm doing well, Nick. Thanks. We always like to ask our guests, where are you calling from this morning, Nick?
I'm calling from Denver, Colorado.
Oh, nice. How's the weather out there this morning, Nick?
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah, Denver's a great place, isn't it?
Blue skies, snow-capped mountains.
Yes. How could you complain, right?
Can't complain.
That's terrific. Yeah, it was such an interesting, when I saw your background and your story, Nick, I said, I had to have you on the show. I thought, maybe we can go back to the beginning, because you were very young, really, when you got into this. I think you're even back in college. Maybe we could talk a little bit about the history of line painting and the evolution and the catalyst for even getting it started.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share. I'm from Denver, Colorado, and I was an out-of-state student. I went to Michigan State, and my sophomore year in high school, I wrestled. My parents had to put me in like 3 sports growing up, to keep me from tearing the house apart. And in high school, I really fell in love with wrestling, and did it year round. And so there was a wrestler at Michigan State who had just won the national championship. And it was his freshman year. So by the time I was a freshman, he'd be a senior. And so that was my logic, why I went to Michigan State. Plus, they had a great business school and great campus and student life. And so I literally took out a $500 credit card and bought my flight to Michigan. And that's how I got to East Lansing. I went into Coach Minkle's office and introduced myself, and walked on, became a preferred walk-on wrestler at Michigan State, and it was eventually hit with a $2,000 bill. And for me, it was just, oh my gosh, as a broke college kid, it was just so much money. And I had already maxed out all my credit card options, and the scholarship was probably a couple years out. And so I was going to have to go home. Wow. Thankfully, my girlfriend at the time, later fiance in college and now wife and mother of 4 amazing kids. That's great. She's like, all right, I have $2,000. And, against her sister's wishes, or more so cautions, right? Yeah. Love my sister-in-law. My gosh, but it was a big deal, and that's what kept me in school. But the reality was, oh my gosh, my identity in wrestling. I had to hang up the shoes, and I started a paint company, and I had heard of other actual college franchises where you do college painting, and I needed to make more than what I'd make at the cafeteria. And so I started my own, and this was 2008, 2009, middle of the Great Recession. Keep in mind, it's Michigan, right? And the auto industry was just, oh my gosh.
Yes, that's right.
And so I just went door to door, and I looked at, the bigger the house, the bigger the job, and the more college tuition it helped me pay. That was my logic.
And it worked.
Eventually, eventually got my business degree and started learning about competitive advantage and, positioning, marketing class, learned about, high price, high quality, that's your lane. And was eventually given a book called E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber.
Wow.
And that's where I learned about, oh my gosh, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just one of many people's lives changed by that book.
Yeah.
But that's where the, systematizing and creating process and roles and, duplicating a consistent, reliable service and working on the business, not in it. I really caught the fire for making that a reality. And what I loved about it was, being in business with other business owners. It's just such a unique model. And, I had seen opportunity back in college, and I was, when I talked about opportunity, here's the opportunity. I was getting complimented for showing up, doing a good job, answering my phone. And before the job, I'm being asked, hey, you going to run off with my deposit? No, why would I do that? You're going to charge me more when the job starts? No, this is the price. Are you going to job hop? What does that mean? And so I'm sitting in lecture hall, I'm sitting in a class, and I'm learning about competitive advantage, and the light bulb's just going off that, oh my gosh, so I look into national companies, and there weren't any that were focused on high-end homes. And that is, that person bought a high-end home. They bought a high-end car. They went to a high-end restaurant with friends the past weekend. They want to pay more to get more. They care about quality. They want to do it right. They have discretionary income to update one of their highest valued assets. And so clearly a niche And as I'm sitting in marketing class learning about positioning, oh my gosh, just so grateful for my business degree, and really helped me see the opportunity. And I'm so grateful for that mentor who gave me that book, because that gave me direction for how to bring this niche need that is not given on a national level, just to give direction around how to deliver that value. And I'll tell you what, I've just fallen more and more in love with franchising. As I've gone down this path. It was 12 years ago when I was given that book, right? So that fire that lit up back then, it was 12 years ago. It's been, and so it's really been an honor and a pleasure, and feel very privileged. But motivated, and it's a big responsibility. So that's pretty much my story.
It's an amazing. I love this story, Nick. As you tell it, I mean, it's just. There's so many reasons to be inspired. We had I interviewed Michael Gerber 3 times on this podcast, and every time I've had him on, I mean, it's always been, you feel motivated, inspired. I mean, it's amazing, because he's up there in age now, and he's still going. I mean, he doesn't stop, and I know he had a big influence on my life. But it's interesting as you tell your story. I've heard probably maybe on 2 or 3 occasions a similar story of someone like yourself. They read the E-Myth and they got it. You know what I mean? They got the whole concept of systems and processes and things like that. And that was the evolution for what you're doing today. So I mean, I think it's just amazing. And I like how you we're talking about how you positioned yourself in the market, because we've had other painting franchises on the show over the last 15 years, but they're positioned much differently than line painting. I thought it was so clever how you went after the high-end residential and commercial properties. We've had a situation, we've had the interior of our home painted, Nick, in the past, and we had a terrible experience after the guy was done. It took him a month to paint the interior of our house. I mean, so it took much longer than he said. And we don't have a big place, by the way. And then he tried charging us more at the end when he was done, and he was like, okay, well, it's going to cost an extra $1,000. I'm like, well, wait a minute. And I think that's a problem, perhaps maybe in the industry, and you were able to solve that problem. You said, look, this is what I'm charging you, and I'll return your calls, and I'll show up on time. You don't have to worry about me taking your deposit or anything like that. And I just think when I read about you, I said, oh my God, I had to have you on the show. So I'm so happy to be speaking to you today. What's interesting about line painting is you have a lot of different services, don't you, Nick? And maybe, you probably can't talk about all of them because there's so many, but maybe you can talk a little bit, about some of them. Yeah,
I can most certainly share at a high level. We do painting, coatings, and surface restoration. And what that means is, we specialize in custom properties, right? And these properties are made up of many different surfaces. Could be masonry, metals, woods, you name it, right? So you have stucco siding, you have metal railings, you have a stamped concrete driveway that wraps around to the sidewalk and around the pool, and you have stained fascia and soffit boards like your trim, right? Then you have painted items, and there's manufactured windows and doors, right? And every single one of these surfaces is exposed to the sun and the water. It's exposed to the elements. And every surface deteriorates, and it's pretty consistent, whether it's water or sun damage. But coatings act like a glove. They freeze the weathering of that surface, and it's like a glove. It extends the life. It protects it from sun and water damage. And so stucco has an elastomeric coating. Metal has a direct metal coating. Stamped concrete has, acid stains and sealers. And, these manufactured windows and doors, there's a special system to apply, coating-wise to those surfaces. And you have the stained trim and the painted, surfaces. Every single one of those surfaces on a custom property is worth tens and tens, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars. The stucco, $150,000 to redo. The stamped concrete, another $100,000. The windows and doors, they're Pala. They're on a $1 million, multi-million-dollar home. $300,000 in windows, and so when they start oxidizing, when they start chalking, weathering, the seals start breaking. But if you can put a coating, it's like a glove, is now protecting and extending those very expensive assets that depreciate. And then aesthetically, oh my gosh, you could totally transform the whole property now.
Oh yeah.
And so it happened. I was standing in front of a client's house, and I'm looking at the trim, and we had done a great job on the trim, but the gutters that caused the trim to peel in the first place, they were still leaking onto our fresh paint job. We used high-grade products, extensive prep. We used artisans. It was great, but we just didn't do gutters. We only did paint. And and then I'm looking at the stucco, it's cracked. I'm looking at the windows, they're weathered. The metal fence is rusting and oxidizing. The stamped concrete is, leaving the pores of the concrete exposed, right? But I'm standing in front of this client's house, and I'm realizing that I wasn't giving the client the value that I could have. And I truly should have by saying that we're a high-end painter, we're going to do the job right, but knowing the gutters are leaking, and so it just wasn't good enough, and started looking at paint as what it is. It's just a single type of coating, one of all of the different coatings I mentioned, metals and stucco coatings, and these are just protective layers, but all coating. So paint is one of many different coatings, and when we're able to get into a client's, when we come out and do a consultation with them, we train their eye on all four sides of their home. We share with them what I just shared with you, how we look at custom properties, but then now we're going to show you the sun and water damage on every surface on all four sides of your home. We're going to talk to you about the solutions.
It makes
our
such a
demographic
difference.
has discretionary income. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
It does, Nick. It makes such a difference, doesn't it? I mean, when something is painted, I mean, everything just looks fresh and it looks new. And it's interesting how you mentioned, like, terms like value, which you probably picked up, of course, reading and in your marketing courses and things like that. And how did you hone in on painting, Nick? Because I'm curious, like, if I asked your young self, when you were in high school, if you saw yourself doing something like this, I can tell when I listen to you, I hear somebody who's very passionate and knowledgeable about painting. And I find painting, I tried painting my bedroom years ago, and it was just such a disaster. I mean, it's just what a mess it was. It's a craft, and it's a skill, and it's not easy for anyone to do. I mean, how did you hone in on the whole painting thing? I mean, how did that just come about? I mean, was this something you did it as a kid, or you just identified like an opportunity?
Yeah, let me just clarify. I also am not a very good painter, and it's hard. And I appreciate the artisans that we work with. I'm like, oh my gosh, like that is impressive.
Right.
Wow. Look at the technique in your spray method. Like, oh my gosh, that is, you are really doing the 50-50 overlap, and it is consistent. I never thought I would own a paint company.
Wow.
In school, in college, those were the college kids that were making the most, and I had big college bills. I was an out-of-state student. I don't know if you've looked at out-of-state tuition at Michigan State.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But business school was expensive, and and so not only did I see them making the most on on campus, but I want to step ahead, and I said I'm going to start my own because I need to make that much money to pay my way through school and cost of living and books and everything else.
Right.
So there was a lot of just motivation because I was going to have to pack it up and go back home.
Right.
But my dad was a contractor. He owned a concrete business, and I was on his job sites and felt very comfortable in the blue collar construction, contracting, and so painting for me was, it wasn't really out of the norm.
Sure. Right.
But none of our sales folks at Lime nationwide, none of our franchise owners have joined Lime with previous contracting or paint experience. Like, that's the beautiful thing about painting.
Yes.
There's only one way that the sun causes failure, and there's only a certain amount of solutions for each substrate. And so, that's a beautiful thing about franchise. You go through the academy, you learn the playbook, and I'd mentioned, I attributed so much gratitude for my business degree, sales degree. My sales degree, my gosh, I call it the time in the lab when I was going to school and applying my degree in the field. That sales program, that's the heart of our consultations with our clients.
I think that probably made school different for you too than maybe, I don't want to use the word like a traditional student, Nick, where you say, okay, I'm going to go to college, I don't know what I'm going to do, but that was the motivation for you too, I think, to learn in class, wasn't it? As you probably absorbed everything, again, when I'm just listening to you, you speak like a marketing person, using terms like value and positioning and things like that. And I'm sure that the whole painting thing made school a different experience for you. It seems like you tried to absorb everything, didn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. It was, I was paying for it.
Yes, right, which made the difference, didn't it?
For me, yeah.
That's wonderful. I love listening to this story, Nick. How about, maybe you could talk a little bit about, how you're using technology in line painting today. I'm sure like when you first started off, when you were doing this on your own, Nick, it was probably, there wasn't a lot of technology or maybe even social media, when you first got into this. But how's line painting, using technology in the model today?
Whether it's the sales side or the production side, it's giving transparency into the business.
I see.
And so we're very KPI driven. Leading indicators. We can zero in on a handful of KPIs. These are the behaviors that matter, that really drive results. We can coach around that, and we can create a lot of best practices and then leaderboards, and the game matters and collaboration happens. If I see somebody that's at the top of the leaderboard, I'm calling them, hey, what are you doing?
And, what are they doing?
Tips and
yeah. That's fascinating. What about the industry today? I mean, when I think I don't know much about the painting industry, Nick. I guess it's safe to say, I mean, for me, it's a pretty big industry, right? I mean, people are always going to be painting, aren't they?
That's the beautiful thing about painting.
Yeah.
It's old school, and my gosh, you get in your car, you pull out your driveway, you drive onto the main boulevard, you get onto the interstate, you drive wherever you're going. There are coatings on almost every surface.
Right.
And
you're right.
Every building you go into, every home you go into, it's very much the fabric of the construction industry.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. What's been a tough question, Nick? We sometimes like to stump our guest a bit, but what's been one of the most interesting things that's happened to you since launching line painting? I mean, I'm sure you probably have 100 stories, but I mean, does anything stand out over the years where you kind of say, "Wow"?
Yeah, I think the wow is that, if you have a vision, you have a dream, and you put in work, it's amazing what the power of compounding starts to do.
Yeah.
And, I've seen it firsthand in my life play out throughout my career, but I've seen it in folks that, for example, join at Lime as an entry-level salesperson and work themselves into GM and then franchise owner, then multi-unit owner, and then, top producer in the system. That is vision, commitment, and putting in the work to make your dreams happen.
Right.
And so that's a beautiful process, seeing dreams come to life, right?
Right.
And so we talk a lot about behavior goals. It's like, okay, we can have number goals, but really it's behavior. And the behavior leads to the outcome. And that is such a great truth because it's 100% in your hands. You control it.
Right. That makes sense. I think that's very powerful, Nick. And you were saying earlier, Nick, what's interesting is that you don't really need experience. Like you mentioned, you don't have to be a contractor to become a franchisee to Lime Painting. Maybe, we could talk a little bit about, what's important to you when taking on a new franchisee. Are there any types of traits or characteristics that you think would be important to be successful as a Lime Painting franchisee?
Team builder, empire builder.
That makes sense. Right. And no experience, right? Which is the beauty of franchising too, Nick, isn't it? Is that, it's great to see that, someone, even like myself, who I mentioned, I have two left hands, very uncoordinated. Someone like myself, well, I see the opportunity here, for Lime Painting, that I can get in on that, and I think that's fantastic. How does the training work then, Nick? I mean, once you decide, that you like them, they like you, and they do want to come on board as a franchisee, would they come out to headquarters for training? How does that work?
Yeah, you immediately start working with our leadership support team. We have an onboarding specialist, and we start building your team. And you and your team go through our online academy that preps you for boot camp. Boot camp is a week-long training at headquarters in Denver, the Denver Tech Center. And then once you have gone through the academy, you go back to market, you launch, and we come out for a first field visit, usually about a month and a half to 2 months from launch. And that's, sales, supplier setup, subcontractor recruiting, tech training, and then we come back for a second training, and that's more production facing, and that's about a month and a half, 2 months after the first training. And then there's, we have so many QR docs and very robust, set of, online, adult learning. We have broken down to the user. So if you're a GM, a VRC, a franchise owner, go through your own track. That's pre-boot camp, and then post-boot camp ongoing.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a lot of training.
All of that is called Lime Elite Academy, or as we call it, LEA.
Wow. That's great. And how would you, because you've been doing this such a long time now, Nick, how would you describe, if there is such a thing, I'm sure every day is a little bit different, but what is a typical day like for a Lime Painting franchisee?
That can look many different ways. Two spectrums. If you're an owner-operator, you're doing the sales, the production, the billing, the back-end admin. If you are semi-absentee, you have staff for your sales role, your production role, back-end role. And so two different versions there. But, both are, heavily backed and based off of data, right? The technology platforms. Right.
That's terrific. I mentioned I was studying your background for the last week, Nick, and to me, I mean, you really seemed like you're an entrepreneur. From everything you've learned up to this point, what advice would you give to our listeners in their quest to buy a franchise? Because now that you're in this franchising arena, there's so much out there to choose from. And we find that, in doing this show 15 years, the one thing I've learned is that a lot of people in the beginning, a lot of them know they think they want to get into franchising, but then they see all these different systems and industries, and they get a little bit overwhelmed and confused. And they're like, oh my God, where do I begin? From everything you've learned up to this point, what advice would you give to our listeners in their quest to buy a franchise?
Yeah, if you're going to go in at it alone, that's one way. It can be a little overwhelming.
Yeah.
It could probably be quite overwhelming. You not only need to understand each brand, but you need to understand franchising as a whole.
Right.
And so it's a big ask to go at it alone. I would recommend using a franchise consultant. Like anything else, heavily vet and interview and find what's the great fit. They all have different platforms and styles, but they're all in it to do a great job of matchmaking and helping folks navigate that, the world of franchising, which franchising alone plus all these brands, and there's so many ways to go about evaluating franchise opportunities. I would recommend teaming up with a professional that has experience and has a style that you enjoy and will have fun going through the process with. And there are so many talented, the FranChoice Network, IFPG, FranNet, FCC. Those are four that come to mind. But there's so many. So those are different groups that have consultants, much like real estate agencies. But that's what I would suggest. But I would even go a little bit back to your question and speak to. You said, "Hey, what advice would you have?" I would be upfront that fear steals opportunities, and it may not be a franchise opportunity. It could be any opportunity, it'd be anything. But fear is the ultimate robber, and it steals opportunities over days, over weeks, over months, quarters, and oh my gosh, even years.
Right. Agreed.
And so, conquering, we all deal with fear around everything, but what are your internal mechanisms for converting that fear into fuel and behavior, as opposed to it being paralyzing or just something you don't even want to deal with? If you're talking about business ownership, franchise ownership, or performance at a high level, or if you're just trying to level up and get to the next level with whatever you are doing, there will be fear. And,
of course,
so, my gosh, how are you converting that, owning that, slaying those dragons? And so that's what will allow you to perform for a long period of time. And you need to innovate personally, performance-wise, process-wise. And that's an ongoing commitment. Right. And so I would just say, just do it. Right? Just do it. There's something powerful in taking action to make your dreams real.
Yeah. I think that's excellent advice, Nick. And it's interesting how, you were talking about, using a franchise broker. I've interviewed a lot of franchisees over the years, Nick, and, many of them have used a franchise broker. And what I find interesting is that many of the franchisees, they had something in their minds that they wanted to go into, but the franchise broker was able to introduce them to other opportunities that probably would have been a better fit for them, because they helped them ask like these deep-rooted questions. What do you want the franchise to do for you? And so a lot of them ended up in different industries that they never imagined in a million years they'd end up working in, and a lot of them, very happy and very successful. So I think the advice you give is very strong. What about the future, Nick? I mean, if you can look into a crystal ball, maybe 3 years, 5 years down the road, where do you see Lime Painting?
Making a huge difference through our nonprofit Limelight Outreach. It's tailored towards the youth. And, we're looking to empower the youth through our 4 pillars of knowledge, faith, family, patriotism, and prosperity. But it's an easy turnkey way, that nonprofit, for our franchise owners in their local markets to give back. And so we partner with established nonprofits in the market, and we design campaigns and fund them based on those 4 pillars towards the youth. And that gives our franchise owners a lot of flexibility and their teams to design a campaign, share it with homeowners, get support from the community, and give back. It's really fun. I would love for just Miracles to take over, and for Lime to be known as a company that does good, and not only provides a lot of good value for clients, but what are our owners? How are they stewarding that success in that business? How are they going about it? What is their why? So at Lime, we're very much a values-based company. Lime stands for love, integrity, mission, excellence, and so just being a beacon of good in the community, good in our employees, our franchise owners, our community as a whole, just doing good.
That's terrific. What's the best way, Nick, for our listeners to get more information on lime painting? Of course, there's the franchise opportunity, but even maybe the service itself. I mean, are there any websites that you want to plug?
Limepainting.com. You can search hashtag Get Limed on any platform. So hashtag Get Limed. You find us on all social media platforms, but limepainting.com would be the best way to find out more about lime painting as a whole.
That's terrific. And I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed talking to you today, Nick. I love your story, and I love your franchise model. And I'd love to even have you back in the next year or two as you continue to grow, because I think lime painting has a wonderful franchise opportunity.
I'm very appreciative, Marty. Thank you so much. And I'd be honored to. Absolutely.
Oh, that's just wonderful. This has been my pleasure, Nick. And we'll be right back with more franchise interviews. Coming up on segment 2, you're going to hear what every franchipreneur needs to know before buying a franchise. We're going to play a clip from our popular Great Quotes in Franchising podcast right here on Franchise Interviews.
Franchisers, are you looking to reach aspiring entrepreneurs looking to buy a franchise? Are you looking to reach a highly educated audience on franchising? Franchise Interviews, an up-close, behind-the-scenes look at franchising and entrepreneurship through our website, franchiseinterviews.com. Or you can hear and read interviews as well as get tips from some of the most successful sources in franchising. Our weekly franchise radio show where each week you get to hear a new interview with franchisers, franchisees, franchise authors, franchise experts and attorneys, and our podcast, Great Quotes in Franchising. For more information, go to franchiseinterviews.com or call us at 610-905-2919. That's 610-905-2919.
Hi, everyone. This is Marty McDermott from Franchise Interviews, and welcome to another edition of Great Quotes in Franchising, where each podcast you get to hear a great quote in franchising. You know, Don and I have been hosting Franchise Interviews now almost 6 years, if you can imagine, and it's amazing to see how far the show's come. You know, we frequently joke around that, you know, when we started the show, we started off with about 5 listeners. I think it was my mom, Don's wife, my wife, and a couple of friends and family, and that was it. And, you know, to date, we're over 4,000 listeners on a monthly basis between our radio show and our podcast, Great Quotes in Franchising, and, of course, our website, Franchise Interviews. So we've never done this before, but want to thank everyone for making this show such a tremendous success. During that time, 6 years of doing the show, we've had some incredible quotes on the show, and if you're a frequent listener to the show, you know what fans Don and I are of the legendary Michael Gerber. And you could take any clip or any segment from an interview we've done with Michael, and it's probably noteworthy of being in the Great Quotes in Franchising podcast. But this, I have to say, is certainly one of my favorites, and I've shared this with my students since I've heard this great quote. So here we go with the legendary Michael Gerber.
Having people stretch their imagination and to dream even bigger than what they were previously doing.
Absolutely.
And make it constructive, of course.
Yeah, because I'm actually saying that people don't fail because they dream too big. People fail because they dream too small. People fail because they don't rise above where their experience would lead them. People fail because they don't truly begin to dare to imagine something that they've never actually imagined before. And as I bring people into the dreaming room, as people participate with me, they begin to experience something they have never experienced, or if they had experienced, they'd experienced it years ago, but in some way lost the ability to dream. So it's a remarkable thing. I never would have told you I'd be doing it, but in fact I see it as the absolutely essential piece to anybody who wants to do anything, let alone buy a franchise. The beginning of that process is to dream.
You know, it's really like an awakening. I mean, in life, there's just so much that can just, you know, I guess sort of beat you down a little bit. You know, life's not easy, and there's work, and there's family, and you know, I guess over time that maybe you just don't have the time, or just forget about something simple like dreaming. So you're really just reintroducing it to people, you know, kind of waking them up again, so to speak.
Well, I'm reintroducing the question, what in the hell am I here for?
Right.
What is my life? And time goes on for all of us, and it's tick-tock, tick-tock, and time goes on, and I simply become immersed in all of the doing it that I've committed myself to. And I never stop to really ask, is this really what I want? Is this really what I want to do? Is this really the entire purpose of my life? Is this really going to give me the experience that I truly am hungry for, the joy that I truly am missing right now? What in the world am I doing with myself? And I'm simply suggesting, without asking that question in a very, very provocative way, people miss the most extraordinary opportunities that they will never see until they begin to ask the question, then who am I? What do I want? Where am I going? And these questions begin to provoke some very, very serious introspection, and that's critical for anybody who is, as you say, sitting there about to think about going off on their own, about buying a business, about buying a franchise, or about creating a business of their own. Critical, and nobody's talking about it.
Right, absolutely, yeah. So it's a critical element to entrepreneurial success, Michael. All this dreaming, I think you mentioned in the manuscript, it gives you fuel to stay up late and get up early in the morning.
Well, that's where the juice comes from.
Absolutely.
I mean, can you imagine Michael Dell creating Dell Computer? I mean, you think about that. He was a college student
right,
who began to diddle with this idea, the big idea, the great idea, the great result, and he created this stunning company, this extraordinary company that does what it does in a way that nobody else imagined it could be done. Taking a commodity, a computer, and turning it into a product, a true invention, the way in which Dell provides customized computers in a standardized process. Customized, standardized, an extraordinary idea that rules the world today. And yet you don't hear that expression in most places. And certainly you don't hear it in franchising. Customized, standardized. How do you do that? Well, that requires entrepreneurial imagination and verve, and that's what creates absolutely stunning companies. So if you're going to do that, you might as well do something in the business you're about to create that truly transforms the form of the people.
Franchise interviews from Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia. You're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews.